Hey everybody, it's Dr. Gilchrist, and as a reminder, I am finishing up our lecture on episodic memories, particularly complex episodic memories, so that you'll be more prepared to take the exam on Monday. So all of these different types of memories that we are talking about here, eyewitness memories for crimes, autobiographical memory, which we'll talk about in a few slides, these are all forms of episodic memories, which are memories for events that occur in a specific time. Now, compare this to semantic memory, which are memories for general knowledge, language, and the world, and we'll be talking about those after Monday's exam. So to finish up our discussion of forgetting. So again, kind of going back to Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve. Multiple things ultimately affect our ability to remember items. So we talked about this earlier. So it could be encoding failure, which is when you don't pay sufficient enough attention to encode items into memory to begin with, and you're not going to remember something that hasn't been encoded. Additionally, I showed you Ebbinghaus's famous forgetting curve. I'm going to move my head just a little bit so you can see this right here. So one of the things that we know based off of Ebbinghaus's work, again, he learned a list of nonsense syllables until he had them down perfect. And then after various retention intervals for some lists, some of them he recalled right away. Some took 20 minutes, 60 minutes, 9 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 6 days, all the way to 31 days. What you can kind of see here in this figure is that a good majority of what Ebbinghaus learned was lost within the first hour of having learned it. By the time a retention period of 60 minutes had occurred, less than 50% of the list was still available in memory. But notice that after that initial drop off, you can kind of see that while there is still some forgetting over time, it is much more stable. In addition to forgetting because of decay, we can forget because of interference. Learning new information can disrupt our ability to remember old information. And especially in the 1940s, 1950s, and 60s, there was a lot of discussion about decay theories of forgetting versus interference theories of forgetting. And then finally, we have retrieval failure, where information isn't necessarily forgotten, but we're having difficulty remembering it because of competition with other items in memory. So the idea with retrieval failure is that it's available, but it's not accessible at this moment. So it's there, but there are other items that are competing for retrieval that are hurting our ability to remember it. So now let's move on. So once memories are lost, can they actually be recovered? So there's often discussion of suppressed memories, and I mentioned this in class a little bit, where I generally believe that we remember things, especially things that are traumatic, far more than we can forget, than we forget those things. So you may be kind of curious, do things like hypnosis help bring out false memories or repressed memories? And generally, things like hypnosis don't really affect your memory recall. They're actually more likely to bring up a false memory due to heightened suggestibility than they are to actually pull up something that you've repressed. Now, one of the things that we do know, especially for eyewitness memories, is that forgetting can be reduced with what is called the cognitive interview technique. So the idea here is that you use some of the different cognitive principles that we've talked about in previous chapters to help us remember information. So in particular, we will recall information from multiple perspectives, from multiple time periods. So recalling information in different orders, recalling information from multiple perspectives, and most importantly, getting into the mindset that we were in during the event, and also trying to retrieve the greater context of the event. So basically, what you're doing when you use the cognitive interview technique, when you're recalling from multiple perspectives and with multiple orders and recalling as many details as possible, even when you don't think they're important, you are capitalizing on the encoding specificity principle. We know that retrieval is going to be better when the context of retrieval matches the context of encoding. Additionally, so that context reinstatement is going to be the biggest thing for the cognitive interview technique. And it turns out context reinstatement, making use of encoding specificity, is actually the most effective component of the cognitive interview technique. Now, recalling from multiple perspectives and in multiple orders and recalling all details, no matter how small, capitalizes on retrieval pathways. And one of the things that I've tried to impress upon you that I am going to test you about is that the more retrieval paths that you have, the better your memory for that information is going to be. So capitalizing on all of those different retrieval pathways by recalling multiple perspectives, time orders, or details can be helpful as well. We also know that to boost and protect ourselves from forgetting, we know that repeated testing enhances memory through the testing effect. And additionally, spacing out learning instead of cramming also leads to better retention over time. But oftentimes when we talk about repressed memories or memories that we want to retrieve but can't, we're not necessarily talking about the memory for a test or memory for crimes. We're often talking about memories of trauma, and that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. We'll move on to talk about that when we talk about autobiographical memory. So autobiographical memory, these are memories that are related to our personal life story. And one of the things that we know that seems to be really powerful with respect to autobiographical memory is that information that relates to ourselves is going to be better remembered than information that is not. And this is what is known as the self-reference effect. So what you're looking at here is some data from Kelly and colleagues back in 2002, and they're basically looking at an fMRI in areas like the medial prefrontal cortex, trying to remember words. And what you can kind of see is we're looking at words in relation to another person, words in relation to their printed format, and then words in relation to the self. And one of the things that you can kind of see is that there's not a lot of difference in signal change with respect to words related to another person or words that are related to their printed format. They look pretty similar. Notice that there's less of a negative signal change for words in relation to ourselves, and we do actually see that that signal change, we get less negative signal change for those words. So it seems like there's something very special about information that is related to us compared to other types of processing. Now, let's talk a little bit about our autobiographical memories. So these are memories that are related to our personal narrative. And oftentimes our memories, again, just because they're related to us, doesn't mean that they're going to be any more accurate than any other types of memories. So we will see that a lot of our autobiographical memories are combinations of recall and schemas. So one of the things that I talk about that comes up in your McRaney reading in You Are Now Less Dumb is one of the chapters I had you read is The Illusion of External Agency. And this kind of relates to our understanding of autobiographical memories because we are using both recall, but we're also using schemas about how we think things should go. So the illusion of external agency, and I'm kind of giving the misconception and the truth from McRaney's section. I'm not going to go through the whole chapter. the misconception is that you always know when you're making the best of things. And the truth is, you often incorrectly give credit to outside forces for providing your optimism. So in this chapter, McRaney talks about the importance of really trying to create a good story, this idea that we are constantly making the best of things, that external forces have a lot to do with this, when sometimes it's really just us. But we do have this we have these schemas of underdog stories, happy endings, and kind of making the best of things. And oftentimes, autobiographical memories are going to be these major records of successes or failures that are important to us related to our goals and our major sense of purpose. So one of the things that we will find, and McRaney again talks about the concept of narrative bias. Sometimes we have these memories in our lives that seem disconnected, but we really like the idea of telling a really good life story. And so we're going to try to make those consistent with our lives and with where we currently are over actually being accurate. One of the other things that we find with autobiographical memories is a phenomenon known as the reminiscence bump. So we often find that when we ask people of a variety of different ages, the most influential or best remembered memories of their lives, they tend to recall a lot of information from adolescence and young adulthood better than they recall things from things like childhood or middle age. And part of the reason that the reminiscence bump, this higher recall of information from adolescence and young adulthood happens, is because oftentimes in this period, these are things that we are doing for the first time. And a lot of the things that we do that often become connected to our life story, like getting a career, graduating from college, having a family, all of these different things tend to happen most often in adolescence into young adulthood. Now, emotional events are also kind of related to our life story, and we do find that emotional events enhance our memory for those things. The amygdala becomes activated when we are in emotional situations. And remember that the amygdala is directly in front of the hippocampus. So when the amygdala is activated, that activation is then sent to the hippocampus, which promotes consolidation of this information into long-term memory. Also, in emotional events, so I gave you an example in class today, such as when you're being mugged and somebody has a weapon, or other types of emotional events, we find that our attention narrows. And because of that, we lose a lot of other details that we might have otherwise had for the event. And additionally, for these emotional events, especially if they are connected to us, we tend to think about these a lot more often. And it's possible that these are better remembered because we are repeatedly rehearsing those. Now, because we think about these more and because they are related to our life story, I also want to add the caveat that anytime that you're retrieving a memory, particularly if it's important to your life story, and again, we value consistency over accuracy, there's a greater likelihood for these events to be more open to distortion, embellishment, and they may not be an accurate reflection of events. Now, what about flashbulb memories, like memories for September 11th or March 11th, 2020? These are going to be remembered with a lot of clarity and high confidence. And usually when researchers study these, they're going to look at significant national or international events because a lot of people have memories for these. And as I've already kind of talked about, just because something is confident, just because something is clear, it's not an indicator of accuracy. And flashbulb memories are found to be no more accurate than other memories. And this is because we're confident in them because they tend to be rehearsed more, they tend to be embellished more, and they tend to be discussed with other people, which again means we have a goal to entertain rather than to inform. Anytime that we have an entertainment goal, there is a greater likelihood for embellishment, distortion, and a loss of accuracy. Now, what about memories of trauma? And one of the things that we do tend to find is that arousal, emotional arousal, and stress often enhance consolidation. And we can have a loss of memory for surrounding details due to that narrowing of attention that occurs, but you're less likely to get repression of those memories. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. As I've kind of mentioned, I've had an event that was actually pretty traumatic that I was kind of able to emotionally stuff down for a while, but oftentimes we find that repression happens because of other things that we are doing to manage that trauma, including poor sleep, stress, drugs of abuse, and things like that. And that's more likely to lead to poorer memory for those events than the actual trauma itself. So folks, I told you it'd be about 15 minutes, and it looks like I was right. I will see you on Sunday in the student lounge at 6 o'clock for our study session. Have a great weekend. I will see you then. Bye.